Ladies and gentlemen, a toast to Steve and Eydie.
Hear my voice when you are. Take the train, steal a car, hop a freight, grab a star, come back to me. Heaven, I'm in heaven, and my heart beats so that I can hardly speak.
Yeah, they said, friend, how would you like to spend the long hereafter? I'll tell them what we're after is a one-way ticket to.
I wanna be around to pick up the pieces when somebody breaks your heart.
I knew my life to be my dream come true.
Did he need a stronger hand? Did he need a lighter touch? Was I soft or was I tough? Did I give enough? Did I give too much?
Won't you take a day off, decide to run alone somewhere far away on Vegas style? Oh, how I long to be the one I used to be. Fascinating rhythm, stop picking on me. I'll be my sin, baby. You have got that certain thing, baby. Smiling star and inspiration, worthy of a mighty nation. We have some Gershwin songs. It's time for us to move on. Yes. Of thee I sing.
Well, that was an amazing, amazing introduction to this version of Mia's World. Welcome to Mia's World. Welcome to my world. Welcome to the world of Steve and Eydie. And today's show is a tribute, or rather a toast to Steve and Eydie. It's actually it's several toasts. It's number one, it's a toast to Steve and Eydie, the amazing and iconic duo, Steve Lawrence and Eydie Gorme, who many of us have loved for decades. It's also a toast to Steve and Eydie, which was the incredible, lush and dazzling performance on March 18th at Zankel Hall at Carnegie Hall. Monday, March 18th was just a brilliant show. So it's a toast to the show that was called A Toast to Steve and Eydie. And it's also a toast to my own dad, Harold Berman, who passed in an early April of 2000, but he was a jazz pianist and a musician. And my dad and mom loved Steve and Eydie, and we grew up on Steve and Eydie. So it's just a blend of toasts and tributes to the great Steve and Eydie. And by the way, Steve and Eydie, it's all like one word. And what I do a lot of wordplay and anagrams, and within Steve and Eydie is the word destiny. If you look at the spelling, S-T-E-V-E and E-Y-D-I-E, destiny is in there. And it was kind of destiny when Steve and Eydie met on the Steve Allen Show in, I believe, 1953. Great way to meet. Talk show, great big bands. And actually the tribute at Carnegie Hall at Zankel Hall on March 18th had an amazing 30-piece orchestra led by musical director Ted Firth, who has worked with many, many people, including Marilyn May, who's been on my show, and Bernadette Peters, and many others. And hopefully Ted Firth will be on this show within a few weeks, maybe talking about Steve and Eydie. But before I talk more about it, I just wanted to read, by the way, the key thing here is that Steve's son, David Lawrence, performed the toast to Steve and Eydie with Debbie Gravitte, his performing partner, and it was just a magical evening. So kudos to David Lawrence and Debbie Gravitte. David said, quote, "This event was always meant to be a heartfelt tribute to my parents, honoring the timeless music they made together. My father's recent passing makes this celebration even more timely and poignant. I think the night would make mom and dad KVELL," which if you're not Jewish, you might not know, but KVELL means there's no real translation. Very proud, KVELL. Anyway, yes, Steve Lawrence passed on March 11th, just 1 week before this incredible toast to Steve and Eydie. And what timing, heartfelt, bittersweet, magical. Anyway, there's no better way that I can do it justice than to say things in rhyme, which I often do on Mia's World. So here's what I created right after the performance. It's hard not to be needy, and I didn't want to be greedy at Zankel Hall, because after all, who wouldn't want more Steve and Eydie? To counteract any regrets were the scintillating duets, duo charming and sweet of Debbie Gravitte and David Lawrence, a triple threat. A tribute extraordinaire with such a magnetic pair, the suave and the comic, charisma astronomic with passion and timing and flair. From the ballad I've Got a Crush to On a Clear Day, So Lush, the nostalgia set in to make us all grin amidst all our tears. What a rush. Remembering Don Costa charts, the grand sum of all the parts, Ted Firth, Nelson Riddle, beginning and middle, Steve and Eydie melted our hearts. And that was my tribute, or to the toast at Carnegie Hall, to Steve and Eydie at Zankel Hall. And just some interesting facts about Zankel Hall. I believe it's a 599-seat theater, recently renovated, beautiful. I was in the parterre downstairs, and gorgeous sounds, gorgeous visuals, gorgeous orchestra. So kudos to Carnegie Hall, Zankel Hall, and Arthur and Judy Zankel, who were the major donors to Zankel Hall, financiers. Arthur Zankel was a financier and huge philanthropist. Clive Gillinson, artistic director of Carnegie Hall, also kudos to him and his staff. You know, it's very nostalgic remembering Steve and Eydie Gorme. You know, I grew up in the 60s. I watched Steve and Eydie on Steve Allen and Harold Burnett and Johnny Carson, watched with my parents, grew up in a musical family. My dad was a jazz pianist, and we listened to all the standards, George Gershwin, Irving Berlin. We listened to a lot of Stan Getz and Bossa Nova, Joe Beam, Cole Porter, Andre Previn, Ella Fitzgerald. We watched the great talk shows. We watched the musical variety shows, Carol Burnett, Steve Allen, Johnny Carson. Steve and Eydie were on all those shows. And it's just a magical era to me, remembering them in my childhood. So let's try to see a little piece of Steve on Johnny Carson. He's telling a funny story about visiting the Prime Minister of Israel, at the time, Prime Minister Begin, and his wife. They were not on the list. So here's Steve and Johnny Carson.
Eydie had lunch one afternoon with Mrs. Begin, and she invited us over to the Prime Minister's home, a modest home that they live in. And when we went, I had not met Mrs. Begin because it was a ladies' luncheon. Right. And we went to the home, and outside they have your names, you know, to make sure that whoever was invited is on the list outside. So we went up and said to the guard outside, "Mr. and Mrs. Steve Lawrence to see the Prime Minister." And he looks up and down the list and says, "I'm sorry, there's no Mr. and Mrs. Steve Lawrence there." So Eydie said, "Well, maybe we should go. Maybe she forgot about the invite, you know." So I said, "No, just a minute. Check and see if you have Mr. and Mrs. Gorme." And sure enough, it was listed as Mr. and Mrs. Eydie Gorme.
Mr. and Mrs. Eydie Gorme.
Now, I just want to say, Steve and Eydie, kind of like this magical duo. Steve, to me, I try to combine characteristics of personalities. So Steve, to me, is a little bit of suave and savvy, crooner, smooth singer. It's a little bit like a blend of Jimmy Stewart and Sammy Davis Jr. And Eydie, from the Bronx, this savvy, smooth, lush bombshell. She was actually from Sephardic immigrants, I believe Turkish, from the Bronx. And Steve was from Brooklyn, son of a cantor. I think he sang in a synagogue choir, and his father was a cantor and a house painter. So came from middle-class backgrounds. And I think the problem, according to Steve Lawrence, was Eydie's mom. She didn't really want him to marry her. She always thought that Eydie was Spanish, not Jewish, but they did get married in 1953 in Las Vegas. And Eydie, to me, is kind of like this Brazilian, Mexican, Spanish, Jewish bombshell, and sort of like a combination of Astrud, Gilberto, and Dolores Del Rio, even though she's not Brazilian, she's not Mexican, she was Jewish, and she had this charming, charming blend. Now let's go back to Carnegie Hall and the tribute or toast to Stephen Eydie on March 18th. So it was this magical night of Debbie Gravitte and David Lawrence. They're a wonderful blend. They seem to just capture the spirit and the sound and the lusciousness of the Stephen Eydie sound. And so they did a song list that was just incredible. I mean, it went from Cheek to Cheek to One Note Samba to Together Wherever We Go, Blame It on the Bossa Nova, I'll Take Romance, Go Away Little Girl, which was Steve's #1 hit in, I think, 63. He had over 1 million copies sold and it was #1. And that was written, I believe, by Carole King and Jerry Goffert. But back to the song list, Together Wherever We Go, My Heart Stood Still, I Want to Be Around to Pick Up the Pieces, these amazing standards that you just love and have to fall in love with over and over again. I've Got to Be Me, the hit from Golden Rainbow. What Did I Have? Debbie, according to David Lawrence, wore one of Eydie Gorme's gowns, and David wore one of his father, Steve Lawrence's tuxes. So that was glorious to see. The designs were incredible. Let's see, designs. I want to just give some credit to the writers and the directors. The director of the show was Lonnie Price. The musical director was Ted Firth. One of the other directors was Matt Cowart. The writers were Robert Friedman and Faye Greenberg, David Lawrence's wife. And of course, the main performers, David Lawrence and Debbie Gravitte. Okay, let's just, before we continue with this, I really have to go back to my normal schedule, which is every week on Mia's World, I do a little bit of trivia. So today being March 26th, here's today's trivia. Today's birthdays include Diana Ross, who's 79, Steve Tyler, great rocker, 75, Gucci, the fashion designer, birthday today, Kenny Chesney, country singer, March 26th, Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock in Star Trek, and also a great photographer, March 26th, Martin Short, Jennifer Grey, and James Caan. Today's holidays: National Spinach Day, National Solitude Day, take a little solitude for yourself, and Good Hair Day. Not sure about the hair, it's more like pebbles, but that's okay. Today in history: in 1147, the Jewish community in Cologne fasts to commemorate anti-Jewish violence. 1910, US forbids immigration to criminals, anarchists, paupers, and the sick. 1953, Dr. Jonas Salk announced that he had successfully tested a vaccine to prevent polio, and clinical trials began. Everything comes around: vaccines, immigration, anti-violence, it's all here. 1964, Jules Stein and Bob Merrill's musical Funny Girl, starring Barbara Streisand as Fanny Brice, opens at the Winter Garden Theater in New York City, ran for 1,348 performances. In 1967, March 26th, it's the 21st Tony Awards, the Homecoming play and cabaret musical. 1976, Queen Elizabeth sent out the first royal email from the Royal Signals and Radar Establishment. In 1979, the Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat signed the Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty in Washington, D.C. Where's that gotten us? 1982, groundbreaking in Washington, D.C. for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Wonderful. 1982, Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder released the single Ebony and Ivory in the UK. And in 1997, Annie opened at the Martin Beck Theater in New York and ran for 239 performances. And the limerick of the day, because I wrap up the news in rhyme, as we did for the Carnegie Hall performance of the tribute to Steve and Eydie. Here's the wrap up in rhyme of some of the news. Some celebs mocked the Princess of Wales. I won't bore you with all the details, but elegant Kate, diagnosed of late with cancer, heard many tall tales. The rumors about Kate were flying, as if Hollywood was spying. All untrue, out of place. Now there's egg on their face. Shameful, there's no denying. A new and urgent request from none other than Kanye West. What's in a name? Is it all a game, or is it a TikTok test? In writing his newest demand on several platforms grand, it's to be called Ye. It's official, you see, and the public must understand. He's currently on par with popes and presidents afar. So get ready to greet him if you meet him by Ye, a global star. Fast food workers cannot glower. Many make 25 an hour, but blink again. Is it AI or Zen? Now robots have got the power. Is the DA taking a jab? Or is it a power grab? Net worth is disputable and not irrefutable. Finance is not mixed in a lab. And it's National Spinach Day, so Popeye, salute away. It's much esteemed, sautéed or steamed. Now where is my Chardonnay? Well, I've got my coffee, not my Chardonnay. And thank you to Jade Zabreach, loving, who is my wonderful engineer and editor, and hopefully drinking coffee too. And she's a great guitarist, so gotta look out for her. Okay, Jade Loving, thank you. Back to Loving, our Zankel Hall tribute and toast to Steve and Eydie. Well, let's just go back to some of the amazing things that credits, I guess I would call them, sounds so trite, but you know, that's what it is. Steve was born Sidney Leibowitz in Brooklyn, by the way. As I said, son of a cantor. He was in the synagogue choir, married Eydie Gorme. They met on the Steve Allen Show in 1953. They've got Grammys for We've Got Us, and Eydie got a Grammy for If He Walked Into My Life. They married at the El Rancho Hotel in Vegas. They're just savvy and adorable, and it's hard to find that combo today, I would say. Let's see, they got an Emmy in 1975, the tribute to the Gershwins called Our Love Is Here to Stay, which was kind of their signature song. They were friends with all the great talk show people, Bob Newhart, Carol Burnett, Johnny Carson, and they were on TV as rock and roll was kind of rolling in the 50s and 60s. So that was a tough time, and they made it. 1963 was Steve's hit Go Away Little Girl. They were in Golden Rainbow on Broadway, and he was in What Makes Sammy Run in 1964. And David Lawrence, his son, is following suit. He has his own independent voice and own independent accolades, I guess I should say. He was born in New York City, raised in LA, and let's see, he was nominated for an Emmy for his work on Disney's Descendants. He's won the ASCAP Award for Most Performed Film Score. He does a lot of collaborating. He was commissioned for 3 ballets for Melissa Barak's Barak Ballet in collaboration with the interactive award-winning video artist Refik Anadol. He composed the music for the Lake of Dreams Orb show at the Wynn Hotel. You can hear his music and songs in Freaky Friday, the High School Musical trilogy, the American Pie franchise, Common Law, Muppet Classic Theater, Life Without Dick, Earth, Wind and Fire's Millennium, Diane Shore's Pure Shore, and something I must look up, the HBO documentary, Becoming Mike Nichols. I have to hear that. And it's interesting because I listen to film scores and soundtracks, and sometimes I miss the dialogue in the film because I'm listening so hard to the music. Wonder if that happens to anybody else. Yeah, I'm sure it does. He was the musical supervisor on Life with Judy Garland, Me and My Shadows, and orchestrated the off-Broadway musicals Hello Mudda, Hello Fada, and Tapestry. And his first solo album, beautiful album, Nosotros, is a tribute to his mother, Eydie Gorme, and her recordings with the trio Los Panchos. He went to the Mannes Conservatory of Music, pretty swift. He lives in LA with his lyricist producing partner, wife Faye Greenberg, one of the writers of the Carnegie Hall show. Sheldon, a delightfully, this is according to the program, the Playbill program, a delightfully deranged mutt, and occasionally daughter Mabel Lawrence, who thinks pursuing a career in New York is more important than keeping dad company. That's a typical daughter. Sounds very normal, probably brilliant too. Debbie Gravitte is another Broadway personality, a big personality on Broadway. She received the Tony Award for her performance in Jerome Robbins' Broadway. She's performed with so many orchestras, over 200, including the National Symphony with Marvin Hamlisch, Cleveland Orchestra, Boston Pops, Cincinnati Pops, Pittsburgh Symphony, Jerusalem Symphony, Royal Scottish National Orchestra. When do these people have time to practice? They're always traveling. You know? And in film, isn't she great? The Little Mermaid, TV, Trial and Error, Pursuit of Happiness. It just goes on and on. These credits, the lists go on. And same with Steve and Eydie. And, you know, this tribute or toast was supposed to be a celebration. It was not supposed to be melancholy, you know, because Steve Lawrence passed away just a week before this, March 11th, which is so ironic and so heart-stopping in some ways. And I think it just added to the emotionality and the haunting yet uplifting spirit of the Carnegie Hall, Zankel Hall show. And I wanted to read a quote that David Lawrence said about his father, and a few other quotes as well. Steve Lawrence said, and here's a beautiful picture of Steve in memoriam from the Playbill. My dad was an inspiration to so many people, but to me, he was just this charming, handsome, hysterically funny guy who sang a lot, sometimes alone, and sometimes with his insanely talented wife. I am so lucky to have had him as a father and so proud to be his son. My hope is that his contributions to the entertainment industry will be remembered for many years to come. And a couple of other quotes, one from Carol Burnett. Steve was one of my favorite guests on my variety show, appearing 39 times. He was also my very close friend, so close that I considered him family. He will always be in my heart. And let's see, Seth MacFarlane said, this guy has been a musical hero of mine for years. His effortless baritone and superb phrasing made the most difficult songs sound easy. He was a profound influence. And when I actually got to meet him one night after doing a show in Vegas, I learned that he was also as nice and humble a guy as there ever was. Thanks for leaving behind so many incredible recordings, Steve. You will be missed. Beautiful, beautiful tributes pouring in, and from people not as well known, and you know, not everyone is so famous who was affected. Most of America was affected by their performing and singing. They just a happy time, 60s, simpler lifestyle, and very, very interesting time. I'm glad I grew up then and got to hear some of these wonderful songs and people. So back to the toast to Steve and Eydie at Zankel Hall on March 18th. It wasn't just a musical performance, it was also somewhat comedic, because Steve was very comedic. He had a lot of comedy appearances, Catskills, Vegas, and on the talk shows, as you saw with Johnny Carson. And the songs on stage at Zankel Hall were interspersed with comic bits, so it felt fluid, it felt upbeat, it felt seamless. David and Debbie nailed it. They talked about, in the middle of their song list, you know, in the middle of playing Gershwin and the American Songbook and these great standards like Cheek to Cheek and I Want to Be Around to Pick Up the Pieces and My Heart Stood Still, they interspersed little tidbits and anecdotes. So for instance, they talked about the fact that his dad and mom had 29 boxes of 1,000 jokes each. So instead of getting a semi or a truck to haul the 29,000 jokes, they hired a string section. That was quite funny. Then they showed a video clip of the 9-year-old David Lawrence singing On a Clear Day. And he had that beat going. He had his dad's rhythm and syncopation. And then he said, well, I didn't want to wait around for the agents. So I went back to 3rd grade and wrote my Shecky Green report. It's very fun. they mentioned that Eydie had opinions on everything, and it was just a very fluid kind of evening. And they told some facts, some trivia, like 16 of their sold out performances were in Carnegie Hall, and they had 78 albums. David Lawrence actually worked as the producer on the Tribute to Sinatra album. And Eydie, again, the dresses that Debbie Gravitte wore were stunning. So their look, the visual look on stage was quite elegant. I mean, as I said, Eydie wore these amazing gowns, and Debbie Gravitte paid tribute to that look. Very elegant, but soft and lush. And her wardrobe in Act 1 was designed by Anthony Henkin. In Act 2, her wardrobe was designed by Bob Mackie. Beautiful, beautiful. And of course, David Lawrence looked as suave as his dad always did. The lighting designer was Matt Berman, no relation to me that I know of, but it's a good name. And I'd like to play a little bit of Eydie, who did a lot of duets. So Eydie on Carol Burnett. So let's see if we can see some of that.
Drop of the raindrops when the summer shower is through. So a voice within me keeps repeating, doodly-doo, 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 doodly-doo. Crazy rhythm, here's the doorway. I'll go my way, you go your way. Crazy rhythm, from now on we're through. Doodly-doo.
And, you know, as I said, I grew up in the 60s with parents who were very musical. My mom played mandolin, my dad played jazz piano. So we heard a lot of these standard songs that Steve and Eydie sang and performed. And we watched a lot of comedy and talk shows together in our little bedroom in Queens, Bayside, Queens. And it was just a happy time. And I thank my mom and dad. My mom's birthday today, March 26th. And Orenbeck Berman. And my dad, who passed on April 2nd, actually, he was a little bit magical. He died 3 times. He died in the night of April 1st going into April 2nd. So we thought it was sort of like April Fool's Day. And then the coroner report had 1:30, April Fool's time change, rather. It was daylight savings, so it was April 2nd at 2:30. And then the third one was the report at 3:30. So we didn't really know what happened, but it was a magical night because my whole family was together. And I just remember flying kites at the beach and playing duets with my dad. I play recorder, he played piano. So sometimes the one note samba he would arrange for me, and I got the one note. I didn't have to improvise too much. He was a great improviser. And so we played a couple of standards like Tenderly. So here's a sample of my dad and me playing the recorder and piano duet, Tenderly. So we're just talking about a toast to Steve and Eydie at Carnegie Hall, Zankel Hall, which I attended on Monday, March 18th, just 1 week after Steve Lawrence passed, and his son, David Lawrence, with his stage partner, Debbie Gravitte, did a bravado performance on stage at Zankel Hall with a 30-piece orchestra directed by Ted Firth, musically directed by Ted Firth. It was just a gorgeous evening. And in honor of my own dad, I've been talking about my own dad, Harold Berman, and I just want to read you something about my dad. My dad was just about the most incredible father that ever lived. He was a cryptographer, musician, painter, astronomer, and magician. In fact, he was the original wizard before I even knew about Oz. He made kites fly and crystals grow. He made scraped knees heal and road trips fun. Once, when I burned my thumb on a flaming marshmallow, he brought me a bowl of ice to keep my finger cold all night. When it was sweltering, he told us tales of the North Pole. When it was freezing, he told us to imagine the Sahara Desert. When I was a little girl, he used to take me to the playground and push me on the swings. We'd laugh, and I'd kick and swing higher. I remember looking up and feeling as if I could touch the clouds. He soon made up a song about the sky and how each cloud reminded him of a different animal. Since he was a brilliant jazz pianist, he played it for me and my sister on the piano. It was just about the most touching song I've ever heard now that I'm an adult. Now that I look at the clouds and photograph the patterns for myself and for him, to share the clouds with him. For the last few months of my dad's life, I took lots of cloud pictures and shared them with him at his bedside. He was also a phenomenal painter, watercolors especially. He once spent an entire afternoon showing me how many different greens there were. This is the actual, I framed his description of all the greens, all the mixtures of greens, how to create different shades of green from the different blues and yellows. Sap green was my favorite. He illustrated each green with a sample splash, a dab of that particular green to give the example. He loved to paint, but he loved more explaining to his daughters how to make the picture lovelier. He taught us complementary colors, primary colors, colors of the spectrum, and Roy G. Biv, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet colors of the rainbow, green being the exact middle. He lived life with an unusual talent for balancing the pragmatic and the artistic. He maintained meticulous files, that's what I do, cataloging everything from insurance to cassette tapes, remember cassettes, and kept a daily journal about his medical condition. But then he'd play jazz, throwing all cares to the wind, improvising on the piano keys with grace and carefree spirit. I myself, a Baroque musician, loved to play melodies on my cherry wood recorder as he improvised on a standard tune. My favorite was the Brazilian one-note samba, because for the most part, I had one note and could listen to his brilliant meanderings and harmonies. On a recent visit, this was 20 years ago, somewhere around Thanksgiving, my dad told us girls, my mom, my sister, and me, a story I hadn't heard for over 30 years. It was a story he'd told us when we were little about Nudgy the Noodle. I began to remember faintly the adventures of Nudgy when he first told them to us. Shortly after that, I was inspired to do something extraordinary. I walked a few blocks west over to the Hudson River, the pier near my Greenwich Village apartment, and sat at the river. It was dusk. The clouds were swelling, the sun was setting, the sky was getting pink. The wind was brewing. I normally have a hard time starting and finishing things, from novels to laundry. But now I sat watching the clouds, and without any premeditated plan, I read out the entire story in my own words, pencil sketching the illustrations. I was guided by a force I like to call the father force to write and draw the entire storybook version of Nudgy the Noodle. Over the next 6 weeks, I spent Saturday afternoons doing original watercolor illustrations of the Nudgy book. Each time I visited my father, I would show him the latest drawing and the updated versions. In 2 months, the 32-page picture book was finished. I was determined to show my father my progress and to share the joy he had inspired by his simple words, his beautiful story, and his simply being my irreplaceable father all these years. The energy to initiate, follow through, and finish was mystically guided along by my father. I knew his health was declining, although his attitude remained gentle, noble, and positive throughout. At one point, my sister asked, "What will you do if a publisher wants to use your words but find another illustrator?" I knew in my heart what my answer would be, but I paused, waiting for my father to respond. After a few moments, he unhesitatingly said, "Well then, you'd go to a different publisher." Exactly. When my sister, mom, and nieces gathered around his bedside, it was as if we were the Tin Man, Lion, and Scarecrow surrounding Dorothy when she awoke from her dream. His cancer was a nightmare, and I actually believed he would wake up one day from the bad tornado dream. He died the night we changed the clocks, turning the hour hands forward, spring ahead. Even to the end, he played tricks with time and space. The male nurse from hospice had suggested we put on some music to soothe his soul. That was odd, since he seemed to always have soothed my soul. We put on a cassette of his own jazz music, his own magical fingers swooping around the black and white keyboard with brilliant colors. At one point, my mom asked him if he wanted to dance. They were quite the grand couple on the Rainbow Room dance floor. He could not speak or swallow, but he managed to move his fingers gracefully as if he were conducting or playing some melodies for us. His heart stopped beating only a few minutes later. The tune he was playing on the cassette was Over the Rainbow. And that's a true story. So here's to my dad, Harold Berman. Actually, he was very funny because in the Army, oh, there's a picture, which we'll show. When he was during World War II, he was in the military, and he was at the Adjutant General School in the machine records class at Fort Sam Houston. But when he was in the Army, they asked people for a middle initial because some people had the same name. So there were two Harold Bermans. So he did not have a middle name. So he said he created Harold NMI Berman, which stood for no middle initial. So he was Harold NMI Berman. Cracks me up, actually. Anyway, that was my dad. And when my dad and mom met, they didn't meet on a talk show like Steve and Eydie, but they met at a school dance. And when my father asked my mother for her information, her name, her address, her phone number, she gave it to him. She thought he was Italian, not Jewish. In those days, it was kind of like Jews were not mingling with Italians to get married so much, kind of like the Steve and Eydie thing when his mother thought she was Spanish, but that wouldn't go now. But at that point, my father asked her for her name and information, and she gave it to him in Spanish, Yiddish, and shorthand. And she figured he wouldn't know any of those, but he knew all of those. So he did call her, and they did go out, and 6 months later they were married, and they were married for 60 years or so. Anyway, Steve and Eydie married for over 60 years. What a beautiful couple, and what an amazing, like I say, Steve and Eydie had the word destiny in their letters. And sometimes I do think that it is destiny, what happens in our lives. So it's also destiny that my dad was a court reporter. He worked at the New York State Supreme Court in Jamaica, Queens for many years at the stenotype machine. And actually, we had a friend who was a mime who said he's a jazz pianist and a court stenographer. Same thing. That's what the mime said. Anyway, my dad worked at the New York State Supreme Court as a court stenographer. And at the same time, this was in the late 50s, Alfred Hitchcock was making a film about someone who was wrongly convicted. This was a true story about the wrong man. He was wrongly convicted, and they were filming at the New York State Supreme Court, where my dad was a court reporter. So The Wrong Man, with Henry Fonda, no less. And my mom said, they have to use you, Harold, in the picture. You know, you're the real deal. And Hitchcock did use some real people. So she said, you got to tell somebody to use you. So actually, turns out they did use him. And that was quite a story in the Berman family. And there was one funny story where they were in the middle of filming, and for some reason, Hitchcock's staff didn't remember if they had filmed particular scene, which is odd because usually there's a script girl. But anyway, so my dad said, he told them, I can tell you if you filmed it because I've been transcribing everything. And it turns out they had filmed the scene, and he saved Hitchcock a lot of money. They did not have to film it again. So he said in his very shy, gentle style, Mr. Hitchcock, you could use a guy like me because I could save you money. And they said, well, thank you, Mr. Berman, but no thanks. Anyway, that was the story of my dad and Hitchcock. And it is destiny, what happens in our lives. I think we can all relate to that. And couple of, here's my dad and mom, actually. Anne and Harold Berman. And I think we'd like to just read another couple of quotes about Steve and Eydie. So Neil Sedaka wrote, Steve Lawrence and I were great friends as he was married to my cousin, Eydie Gorme. Who knew? I always thought he was a great vocalist, comparable to Frank Sinatra and Vic Damone. I even had the great pleasure of doing a duet with him on my song, The Hungry Years. He will be missed. And Barbara Taylor Bradford, the author, says, Steve Lawrence was what we call a triple threat. He was a lovely singer, a handsome actor, and a charming comedian. Bob and I enjoyed Steve's music, especially when we saw him perform with his wife, Eydie Gorme. He will be missed. And Leslie Uggams wrote another beautiful thing. So sad to hear of the passing of the wonderful Steve Lawrence. He was in the rarefied air of singers like Sinatra, Bennett, Como, and Damone. Yeah, all wonderful singers. He truly hit his stride when his friend Eydie Gorme got him a spot on the Steve Allen Show. His star never stopped ascending from that moment on. Plus, he later married Eydie, and they became the brilliant duo of Steve and Eydie, who were inseparable till her death in 2013. We can't lose the memories of that generation of stars. Thank goodness for the internet, where we can enjoy their performances and learn of their greatness. Rest in peace, my friend. You're together again. Their signature song was Our Love Is Here to Stay. What a great, great song that they sing on many, many tributes. I believe there was a recent tribute on PBS to Steve and Eydie. And the one that I just saw on March 18th at Zankel Hall, A Toast to Steve and Eydie, with David Lawrence, Steve Lawrence's son, and Debbie Gravitte, both wonderful performers in their own right. David, a composer and collaborator and actor and singer, and the whole thing. It was just a magical night. So hopefully you'll get to see these guys perform again. And I want to play one more song, duet, that I played with my dad on recorder and piano. And this is Don't Worry About Me. Not going to worry about David Lawrence because his star is shining, and Debbie Gravitte as well. Thank you to Carnegie Hall and Zankel Hall and Keith Sherman, Brett Oberman, Lonnie Price, Matt Berman, Ted Firth, just Faye Greenberg, just wonderful people, just wonderful staff, wonderful concert. Thank you for listening to Mia's World, and we'll go out with another wonderful performer that I've been playing and interviewing for years, Alexia Bontempo, in honor of Eydie Gorme, who sang Blame It on the Bossa Nova. Alexia Bontempo is Brazilian, and actually my father loved Brazilian, and so in honor of my father too, we'll go out with Alexia Bontempo. Thank you for listening. And the song is I'm in Love Again.